everybody, and welcome to this course about creating lightsaber battles using the open source software OpenTools. If you're interested in following the entire course, you can find it on Skillshare or on Udemy. There's a link in the description. In this video, we are going to use GIMP to cut off my arm. We are gonna cut off my arm purely digitally though, at least I hope so. So anyway, let's get started. First thing we need to do is export 3 of the most important frames from the footage. We need the first frame, which is basically an empty frame. It only has the background and it's gonna serve as the background. I made a little bit of a mistake and you can still see my arm on the left hand side of the picture, and you can also see the stick, my bicycle pump, which serves as a lightsaber, but in my case it's not going to cause any problem. So let's ignore those. We can use OpenTools to export the frame. Just select the frame and go to Render Output Settings. Then we set the start frame and the end frame to 1, and we set the output file and the output folder down here. Once we're done, we click on Render. And this is a preview of what we're gonna get. Or showing it to you in the file browser, this is what we have. Next, we want to export one of the frames where I'm gonna cut off my arm. This frame just after the arm has been cut is an appropriate frame. Again, render output settings, and now select the frame number 722 up into 722. And when I render it this time, I see that I made a small mistake because the lightsaber is still visible. Ideally, I only want to have a picture with only column 1. So let me just delete this picture and hide and deactivate column 2. And I also forgot to change the name of the file to middle. And then I can click on render, and this is the picture without the lightsaber. Finally, another picture I need is the picture where I'm suffering because my arm has been cut off. That's gonna be the final frame. This one. That's frame 732. And I'm going to rename it to final because it's the last frame, and click on render. Okay, so now I have exported 3 frames from my picture, and I'm going to open the final frame in GIMP. GIMP is another awesome free and open source software, which is just like Photoshop, used mostly for photo editing. In this image, I'm mostly interested in showing my torso, excluding my arm. So what we do is we use the lasso tool to cut out my arm. Just use the lasso tool to make a fine selection. The part close to my body on the side of my arm is most important. On the other side it's not that important, so you can do a very rough job there. And I'm going to press Ctrl X to cut it, and then press Ctrl V to paste it. And on the new layer I'm going to right click and choose to new layer. And as you can see, now we have 2 layers. One with more or less my body, and the other one with everything else. Okay, that's good enough for now. Let's import the initial layer next, which is going to serve as the background. Let's move the layer down to the bottom and rename it to background. As I mentioned, we still have a few items which shouldn't be in the background, like for example, you can still see my arm and you can still see this bicycle pump. This is not ideal in general, but in this case I actually got lucky and it doesn't actually affect the animation. So let's continue. We have 3 layers. We've got pasted layer, which we're going to use mostly for my torso. We've got background, which is going to be obviously for the background. And we've got another layer, which we should actually delete because we're not going to need it. Just right click on it and select delete layer. So now we have only the background layer and the pasted layer. And we see that where we cut out the pasted layer, we actually see the background. In other words, putting the pasted layer on top superimposes my torso, excluding the arm, on top of the background. If we make the background layer invisible, we see this gray checkered pattern, which denotes transparency. Next, we're going to use the heal tool and the stamp tool to paint over the part of my arm which we can still see. To activate the heal tool, click on this button and press H. We can change the size of the tool down here. Click on Ctrl to select the source color. As we paint, we see 2 circles moving. The one circle which follows our mouse is the brush, and the other circle is the color of the brush. That's where the brush gets its color from. Right now, it's probably better to use the clone tool rather than the healing tool. So click up here and press C rather. But we have to be careful when we reach the edge because we don't want to paint over the transparency. But we can fix that by selecting only the non-transparent part. Just right click on the layer and choose alpha selection. Or alternatively, you can lock the alpha by clicking on this icon here. Okay, next we see that there's quite a clear seam between this torso layer and also the background layer. That's because my body is actually casting a shadow, which is why the background layer is a bit lighter. So after all, I'm going to remove this part of the layer using the lasso tool again. Just make the selection and press the delete button when you're done. Next, we import the middle image, out of which we're going to cut out my arm. Once again, we use the lasso tool to make the selection. And then press Ctrl X and Ctrl V to cut and paste the arm to a new layer. We delete this layer because we don't need it anymore and rename the new layer to arm. So now we have all 3 layers and we need to export them. Let's start by exporting the background. First we hide the other layers. Select File, Export As, and we're gonna export it to a file named background.png. Next, we're gonna export the pasted layer. And export it as a file named body. And then we're gonna export the arm. But before we do that, we need to delete the other 2 layers temporarily. so that we can easily adjust the canvas size to the layer by selecting Image, Fit Canvas to Layers. And once we've done that, we can export it. Let's export it as severedarm.png. Now we press Ctrl Z a few times to bring back the layers, because maybe they'll be useful in the future and we don't want to do that work twice. And that brings us to the end of this video. Thanks for watching. In the next video, we're going to take the three images which we just created, in other words, the background, the body, and the severed arm, and we're going to import it into OpenToonz. We're going to animate the severed arm. And then in the video after that, we are going to add the background and the body images in such a way to make it look like the arm has actually been cut off. So, looking forward to it. See you in the next videos. Bye bye. So I hope you liked this video. If you did, why not support this channel by liking and subscribing. You can also check out my website for more free stuff. So long for now, see you in the next video. Bye bye.